Hey, welcome to Defining Success. Hi, Eric.
How you doing, Marion?
I'm so good now. I know I've already said this to you, but I've been really, really excited to do this, and I'm so happy to see you. Thank
Well, I'm
you.
happy you thought of me.
Before, oh God, are you kidding me? Of course. Before I jump in and read your bio, I just wanted to say and share with you and the listeners that, you and I had been teaching and instructing many, many years ago around the same time. And we would sort of like see each other at Equinox and in the rooms. And it wasn't until recently that we were sort of reunited, thanks to your wife, Deborah. And it just feels like a real blessing. And seeing you and being able to give you a hug and all those feelings came back. And I just wanted to say thank you. And I'm so grateful to be reconnected with you.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's super special when you reconnect with someone from a previous part of your life and their life's turned out. You get to hear their stories and catch up on what seems like a long time, but it goes, as you know, in the blink of an eye.
It really is. It's so special. So, having said that, I'll just jump in, read your bio, and then we're going to get this conversation started. Okay. Here we go. Eric Von Frohlich, coach, strength and conditioning pioneer with Parkinson's since 2020. Eric is the founder of EVF Performance and the global franchise Row House. Eric is a veteran of the fitness industry who knows how to build and scale. Diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2020, he has applied his one key truth philosophy to his own health and athleticism. Eric combines business strategy with a focus on family and faith to help others build their healthiest lives. Straight to the point. So good. And, before one more thing I wanted to share, and then I will stop. It will be you doing most of the talking here. But right before we got on this call, a little while ago, you shared the EVF manifesto. And I wanted to ask you, when did you write that?
I wrote that one evening when I couldn't sleep. It was like 3 in the morning, and I was just like wanted to do a brain dump. And so I picked up a piece of paper and just started jotting down random thoughts and, philosophies based around my training and my teaching and things that I've learned from other coaches and just from things that students had shared with me. And it was just a literal brain dump. And I put it in a book when I got done with it. And it sat in the book until my wife came across it one day. And I think it was in The Power of Now. And she pulled it out and she's like, this needs to be on your wall at your gym. And I was a little too, uh, I'll use the right word in maybe the wrong way. I was a little too humble. Maybe it was actually just scared to put that out there. But I put it in my office on a thumbtack and figured the people that were meant to see it would seek it out and find it. And sure enough, it actually became more of a showcase piece than I anticipated by doing that. And but the people who needed to find it found it, and it spoke some truth to them, and it was great because it's what probably binded us together, and initially anyway.
And what year was that
That
around?
was 2012.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read. I asked you right before we hopped on if it's cool with you if I read a bit. I'm not going to read the whole thing because I really want you to do all the talking here. But I just wanted to read a little bit from this because 2012, we're now 2026. I mean, you have always been ahead of your time because this manifesto feels like it's being preached now. All right, I'm just going to jump in. The EVF manifesto written by Eric. We believe in strength and conditioning. We believe that fitness creates opportunity and freedom, that what we learn in life applies to the gym, and what we learn in the gym, we apply to life. Truth is universal. We believe that fitness teaches us about ourselves, that action displaces fear, that health is a lifelong journey, that how we handle things that are small will show how we handle them when they are large. We believe that strength is mental, physical, and spiritual. That through training, we learn perseverance, dedication, courage, and sacrifice. We believe in the empirical. We lead by example, that one may teach but two should learn. We believe silence is more powerful than a scream. There's more, but I'll just take a pause there because it's
a lot to digest.
It's so good.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. So all that to ask you this one question that I've really been looking forward to asking you, which is, where did your passion for fitness come from?
Well, I was a hyperactive kid, and my mother was smart enough to encourage exercise as opposed to Ritalin or Adderall or whatever the preferred drug of choice was at that point for parents who didn't want hyperactive kids running around.
Yeah.
So she always sent me out in the park and out into the field and just to the woods to go playing and get muddy and enjoy life. But the real passion started when I came across the Jack LaLanne episode in my grandmother's living room. I couldn't have been much more than 4 or 5. And she lived in Astoria, Queens. And I was sitting on the floor watching her big black and white TV. I'm going to date myself a little bit. And Jack LaLanne was the ultimate pioneer in the fitness space, for those of you who knew of him. And he was doing dips between 2 kitchen chairs. And it just captured my imagination. It just, everything that he represented just spoke to me on a very deep level, for as deep as a 4 or 5-year-old could be. And it captured my imagination, and it was just something that I wanted to do as well.
Wow, you actually remember that. It made that much of an impact on you.
Vividly remember it, as if it was yesterday.
You know that I was not expecting you to say Jack LaLanne.
I know, but for those of you that didn't know, Jack LaLanne was a combination of CrossFit and gymnastics and powerlifting, and he kind of embodied fitness and movement as medicine, and diet as being foundational to your experience. And he opened up, not to make it too much about Jack because he's had his accolades, but he opened up his first studio, I think it was in 1928, and he had a juice bar in it. And he started working with students that were out of school, and he sent the kids that were overweight back underweight, or sent them back in better shape. And the kids that were underweight, he sent back to school more muscular. And he just kind of broke through. And the irony is I started in fitness, my professional career, working with kids. So I kind of didn't remember that as an origin story until kind of after the fact, and I took that course of action to start my career as well.
That's so interesting, that parallel. Yeah, I saw that. I was reading some stuff about you, and I didn't know that you started working with kids. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. When I wanted to go into fitness, I was heavily into jiu-jitsu at the time, and group exercise kind of made sense to me because it's basically how you teach in the martial arts format. You get up, you demo a move, you break into little breakout groups, and you have your students go through their movements, and you're making corrections as they're going through it. And it just kind of had a very kind of hands-on transfer of knowledge that was very practical. But I decided the quickest way to start was, and the most impactful way to start would be working with kids in an after-school program. So I put together a speed, agility, quickness program of like dynamic athletic movement patterns and running and jumping and plyometrics, and just made it fun, kind of sticking to the concept of Frohlich being my last name, which means to be happy and to frolic. And delivered this to the principal, who is your classic Catholic school teacher, scary nun, kind of everything that I went to Catholic school, so I'm speaking from experience. Right. But I went in there and kind of sold them on this program that the kids could sign up for, like $5 a session, and we do it for free for anyone who needed help. And what I thought would be 5 or 6 people after school turned out to be 35. And I wasn't quite prepared for it, but improvised and made it happen and turned into being a really great thing. And then my career kind of jump started with that. We did that for the rest of the school year. And the kids were loving it and we were having a great time. And that was just kind of the beginning.
Wow. So I had no idea. This is
I
so
kind of
cool.
forgot about that, to be honest
When
with you,
you,
until you asked it.
it's so cool. And when when you started telling about this, you said you wanted to get into fitness. So I am curious, what were you doing at the time? Did you have another job?
I had taken a little time off from my previous job. I was helping my family with their food business. So I
Hmm.
was in food service, delicatessens, coffee shops, things like that. And knew that that wasn't for me, but I was helping my family out and always had this passion for fitness. And friends from high school reminded me recently on a video that I was always talking about opening a gym and being into fitness and teaching people through the metaphors of fitness. And it was just a part of my life for as long as I could remember.
Hmm. That's so cool. And so, and your parents there they had delis. Was this on Long Island?
Yes,
Hmm. So they were in the
exactly.
food business. Okay. And when you got into working with kids and you started this, you were doing this after school. And by the way, I love that you mentioned that it was much bigger than you expected, but you just rolled with it. Um, were you were you by yourself doing this? One question. Did you have anybody doing this with you?
No, I was doing it on my own. And
And
sometimes you fear success more than you fear failure because success has a consequence that something's going to be lost. Whereas if it's just failure, you're not really losing anything. You're just going to learn from it and build on it. But
totally.
the pressure was on, and
Hmm.
uh, and it was amazing because you saw this correlation of part of the program was we would pick a metaphor, like a story metaphor, the little engine that could, or something to that nature, and we'd read it at the end of the workout. And I'd ask the students, how did they see themselves as the hero of the storyline? And so there was this cognitive discussion about how kids would picture themselves in the adversity that they were going through and the challenges that the hero faced in the story. And they kind of found themselves in that same, so they could come away from the lesson with a metaphor and a story that would be something they could build on and see themselves as a hero in it.
Wow, Eric. Wow. That's incredible. What an
I don't know where
amazing,
that came from, but
wow. I mean, I think we need to do that again. That is,
yeah,
what
I
an
think I need to
incredible,
go back to that.
yeah, those kids their lives must have been changed forever by that experience with you. That's so beautiful. Wow.
Thank you.
And
I don't know
yeah.
if I did a great job articulating it, but it was an amazing time and it went incredibly well and it gave
Hmm.
me all the confidence I needed to step forward and move forward in the direction of coaching and training one on one and stuff like that.
So before we move on, one thing I did not get to ask you is, did you go to college?
I did. I went to school for 2 years part time
Hmm.
and then kind of figured out towards the end of the second year that it really wasn't where my passion and my desire was going to be nurtured. And so I
Right.
stepped back and went helped my family with their business and then eventually went into fitness full time.
Yeah. Yeah, got it. Okay. So now you've worked with kids, you've done this incredible program. And now what's the next step that got you to this like next chapter of your fitness career?
Well, the summer kind of hit, so the kids weren't around, and I had to kind of keep my momentum moving. So I decided to venture out to the Hamptons because that's where everyone was. No one was at work theoretically. And
Yeah.
so I went out there and laid on the beach for an anxiety session that I was having and had some sciatic pain. And I kind of read that my body was telling me that it was afraid, but I needed to move forward because one of my lessons that I wrote in the manifesto was action dispels fear. And
Hmm.
so I laid on the beach and I felt the sciatic pain, and I was like, how am I going to go teach and coach and build a career if I can't control my own body? So I decided at that moment that it wasn't so much my body, it was just the fear kind of resonating. and talking or trying to convince me not to move forward in this direction. And I was like, well, I'm going to get up, I'm going to walk into the gym, I'm going to pitch myself and pick up a couple clients and start this thing, whether it kills me or not. And at the first step I took, I felt the pain again, but I just kept walking and the pain completely went away. It was the last time I had sciatic pain. And we went to the gym and pitched them on clients of mine coming from New York out to the Hamptons, which was true. It's just I didn't know any of those clients. I just didn't meet them yet. And quickly got ingrained in the culture of the gym, and it just kind of blossomed from there.
Yeah. Wow. So the sciatica story, is that the first time that you experienced sort of a mind over pain or mind over matter like that? Being able to sort of step outside of the pain, get beyond it. Is that the first time you experienced anything like that?
I don't think it was the first time, but it was certainly the most profound.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like very direct, and it was very accurate to what was going on, and it was just a matter of stepping through the pain.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Which sent me onto a whole kind of study of psychoneuroimmunology and how your body speaks your mind, and kind of got me going in that direction of looking back at my childhood when I had a period of time where I was accident prone and my parents were getting divorced, and correlated all the injuries with the psychological spots that I was in each of those injuries, and laid it out on a chart and some paper, and decided that there was correlations between all of it, and just drew it up. And then I went and read some more books on it and found that each one of the psychological phases I was in was correlated to the injury that I was suffering. Mm-hmm. And it kind of brought the concept home very full circle. And, having such a tangible experience to draw from was impactful.
So you're really self-taught in all of this?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah. You know Louise Hayes?
Yes.
I'm sure you heard. Yeah. That was, I grew up, my mom was there, if I had a sore throat, my mom would get the book out. You're not speaking up about something. What is it that you're not speaking up about?
Ironically, she was married to Wayne Dyer.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
wow.
Quite a power couple.
Yeah, quite the power couple. I actually really never knew that.
I was kind of introduced to a lot of those. As a Man Thinketh was one of my favorite books as a child, James Allen. Mm-hmm. Basically, your mind's a garden, and you nurture your garden, and you plant the bushes that you wish, which are thoughts. And from those thoughts come your actions, and from your actions come your habits, and from your habits become your lifestyle in your life. Yeah. And so, Norman Vincent Peale and the list of early positive thinkers and psychoneuroimmunologists and the whole plethora of mind-body connection was early on in my life.
Yeah. And when you worked with clients in those days, were you bringing that to the work you were doing with them?
Very subtly.
Yeah.
I would view what they were going through that lens, and then would slowly uncover what was the real cause of whatever they were going through, and then try to work my way backwards without too much woo-woo and too much,
Right.
So, yeah, it was very interesting.
Yeah, and I'm sure.
And I still reference those same books.
Yeah. And, I don't, just for reference for people who are listening, at the time that we're talking about, it wasn't that common to have this approach to fitness. I think people are starting to become more open to it. But at the time, fitness was still very sort of focused on, it was very immediate result driven. Wouldn't you say? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
I was approaching it more as from a lifestyle coach, a mindset coach. Mm-hmm. And the physical stuff was important, but it wasn't nearly as important as the origin of why people were in the shape that they were in, for better or worse.
Yeah. Yeah, which is why I was so excited to read your manifesto, or part of it, but because, again, you were so ahead of your time. And, you weren't just thinking these things, you were actually putting them into action with people, which is really, so impressive. And I can only imagine that, well, I know for a fact because I was in the orbit that people just loved working with you. So, how quickly did your following, how quickly did that start to pick up and become something that you could really put your hands on?
Well, my Hamptons experience at one day walking through the fair uh, immediately burst into a bunch of clients. I started working out in the gym and would meet people, and they would refer me to other people, and my roster
Yeah.
quickly filled up. You only
Yeah.
have so many hours as a one-on-one coach. It quickly filled up, and kind of set the stage for how many hours I was willing to work.
Right.
And at that point, I was young enough and ambitious enough that I would work through lunchtime. People would bring me lunch as part of their training session if it was between 12 and 1. And I would work through lunchtime and throughout the afternoon. And I had a pretty full roster from then on.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty quick. But then I came back to New York and the end of the summer and had to reconnect the dots and went to New York City because everyone went back from the Hamptons to the city and started doing personal training again. But then that broke into it, and accidentally I became a spin instructor.
Yeah. Which I've been really curious about because I know you're not necessarily a one modality person. I think that you, at least, your track record has been you like mixing it up more. So
Yeah.
I was really thinking about you as a spin instructor, and I'm like, did you enjoy doing that?
Well, it happened because I was racing mountain bikes at the time, and I rode cycles for fitness, but really it was about mountain biking. And there was one morning at 5 a.m. when I had a client who didn't show, and the instructor didn't show for the 6 a.m. cycling class. And this was at Crunch on 59th Street.
Oh my
And I
God.
was like, and I had never done a cycling class, but I'm like, it's riding a bike. Like, how hard can this be?
Yeah.
So I pulled out one of my mixtapes and threw it in and told people that I just wanted them to ride with me and we'd get a workout in and we'd make the most of it. And it became my time slot, and I kind of never let go of that position. And we packed the room and it became like a thing.
Yeah. That's so great. Crunch at 59th Street. I remember it well.
Marion, you're pulling up some memories I haven't thought of in like 30, 40 years. So
Well, I'm so happy because I really was so curious to ask you that. Like the spinning, I never would have thought, had I known you then, I probably wouldn't have said, hey, do you want to be a spin instructor?
Exactly.
But it's great to hear that's how you got in the room because someone didn't show up.
Yeah, someone didn't show up. I had a client that didn't show up, and it just seemed like a natural fit. I saw all these people like disappointed that they couldn't ride, and I'm like, let's just go for a bike ride. And I just made it like one of my trail rides, and just made it up from the get go, and they loved it. So we just kept doing it.
That's so great. And then so now you're teaching spin and your private training.
Yeah.
And were you teaching any other group exercise classes?
Not at
Yeah.
that point, but soon to follow was my kids program, which I decided would be a great adult program. So I waited for another instructor not to show up and ended up teaching his class. And that quickly became a class that became known as practice, which I took to Equinox. And, the funny story was they built up remember Jeff Martin?
Of course.
Okay, so Jeff Martin and I got along really well, and he started promoting that I was going to teach at Equinox, and he was very excited and convinced me that I should do my Group X class. And sure enough, I show up the first day, I have it all programmed out, and there's 40, 50 people standing outside just because of Jeff's press.
Yes.
And
he's the best.
which was great. So I get into the room and I introduce myself. I put my music on and I start my class. And sure enough, every now and then I hear the door open. And I'm thinking, oh, more people must be coming in. But I'm, paying attention to my students and my programming, and there's a lot going on. I'm not realizing what's actually happening is people were leaving. And so apparently the program was a little too aggressive and they were dropping like flies. I finished the class with 2 people,
Oh
and
no.
a crushed ego. And sat there for about 20 minutes after the class and said, I can either realize that I can't do this and come to terms with that, or realize that these just weren't the right people. And that
Hmm.
if I stay true to what I'm doing, the right people will show up and they'll find it. And sure enough, that took a little time. It took about 3, 4 weeks. But, 2 people became 6 people, became 8 people. And then I had a room full of about 30 guys that were young and athletic and wanted to train the way I was training, despite numerous people telling me that if I don't do 2 steps to the right, I need to do 2 steps to the left. And if I did anything that was asymmetrical, that it was not group fitness. And I
Right.
remember retorting that when I run down the field playing a sport, I don't count how many times I cut to the right and how many times I cut to the left. I just am engaged in the activity, and if that wasn't for them, then they could find another place to train. So
Hmm.
I was confident enough and arrogant enough to get away with it, and it just turned out to be a whole thing. And then practice, because it was a room full of 30 guys, uh, that attracted a certain group of women, and it
Right.
became more of like a balanced class. But there was a line through the hallways of Equinox when 6:30 came around,
Love
and
it.
it was a moment in time. So I still have great memories from that class. Still have a lot of friendships from that class, and it's where I met Deborah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh, Deborah was taking your class. She was taking
yeah, she was a
practice.
student.
I had no idea. That's so cool.
Hope I
So
don't get in
that,
trouble for that.
no, that's great. That's fantastic. And, I also feel like it's important. Let's give a time. When is this? This is what year did you?
2000, at this point, we've jumped
Early.
around a little bit, but
Yeah.
2003, 2004.
Yeah. So this is early 2000s. And again, if this was, excuse me, I thought I had do not disturb. Let me make sure. Yeah. Just for reference, like, this was a time before um, really social media and before, um, people would, like you said, wait online. And that community that was formed in these classes was a really big deal then.
Well, they were
Um,
chatting with each other online about what to expect, about if they were new or they were veterans. And,
yeah.
there was like a buzz that they kind of found something that spoke to them and was changing, their fitness for the better. And it was exciting.
Yeah. Really exciting time. And how many years do you think you taught that for? I know that's a tough one, but it was more than a couple of years, right?
Probably 7 years, 8 years.
Hmm. Hmm. And what came out of that?
Well, I think the confidence that if I'm scratching my own itch and doing what I want, there's other people that would probably enjoy that as well.
Hmm.
I think it's really interesting to to my perspective, at least, that so many people try to copy each other and try to play it safe and do the same type of programming, play the same music, just kind of be whatever they think that their client wants, as opposed to being true to themselves and scratching that itch and building your programming and your music and your tastes around a deeper truth.
Yeah, totally. And really, once again, you were ahead of your time teaching a class that was unlike anything that was being taught at the time. And now is relatively common, which I don't mean to dumb it down, but it's not a it wouldn't be a surprise to walk into a room and find a class like that, and you started it. And so I think it's so interesting to hear you say, excuse me, to scratch your own itch and that people will find you. But I don't want to overlook the genius of it, because it's not like you were just teaching a class that other people seem to like. I mean, a lot of thoughtfulness and planning and time went into these classes.
Yeah,
And
there was a lot of programming that I was
yeah,
trying out and demoing and trying
yeah,
on people. And yeah, there was definitely a big exploration phase.
yeah. So
And,
there's
and a lifetime of athletics as well to kind of validate what I was doing was scalable and was repeatable and
right.
teachable.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's that beautiful marriage of doing something that, yes, makes you happy, but
Mhm.
also putting in all of the energy and effort into making it something that other people will gain from, right? So,
Yeah.
wow.
Well, I always prided myself on the ability to scale within a group. So I could have and had 90-year-olds in the classroom who told me that they were told to come because they lost a spouse and it was going to change, exercise would change their life. And he was a psychologist. And it stuck that, he had written millions of prescriptions for people. He was a psychiatrist, excuse me.
Hmm.
He had written million prescriptions for people for anxiety and depression and never thought of exercise for himself. And, told him, comforted him with just move at your own ability and move at your own pace and you'll get through this class. And he did, and he had a wonderful time and became a regular in my class. And on the other end, I had people who just told me it couldn't work and I shouldn't do it. And what I was doing wasn't sound as far as they were concerned because they didn't learn it that way.
Right.
And it was interesting the variety of people that would come in, but there were still people who would come in and realize it wasn't for them and they would take off, and that was okay
Hmm.
because it's not for everyone.
Yeah,
But
totally.
just being true to that was sometimes I wish I still had that confidence.
Well, perhaps you do. It just plays out differently.
Exactly.
We're getting there. So, okay. So, from you taught this for about 7 years, you say, and then when does EVF come to market?
EVF was an idea for a while. I planned on opening it about 2007, 2008. And unfortunately, my mother wasn't doing well at the time. And I decided that it wasn't quite the right time to throw myself into a new business. But the idea was to get me out of running around Manhattan, Connecticut, and Long Island and get me centered in one place where I could have a following and kind of build
Mhm.
my own program. Uh, and so around 2012 was when I finally pulled the trigger and opened up EVF. But it was, an idea from my earliest days, and that was going to happen. I just needed the right time and the right location.
Mm-hmm. And where was that location?
Uh, 1623 York Avenue.
Okay.
So the Upper East Side, which
And
was where I was teaching most of my fitness.
yeah. And you were with Deborah at this point.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd
And
say Deborah was a catalyst to getting
right.
me to drive and open it up.
So this was sort of, was this the early stages of you and Deborah becoming not working partners as well?
Well, the funny thing is because I'm sure you're getting a build to this, but we wrote the business plan up for EVF not for EVF, excuse me, for Row House on a napkin in like 2008, and decided that we needed some operational experience, and opening a CrossFit gym would be a good place to jumpstart some of that operational experience on building community and building a brand. And I had mixed programming. So I had my CrossFit programming, but I had my EVF programming also because I felt like it stood the test of time.
Mm,
And despite everyone telling me you couldn't do that, you couldn't mix modalities, it ironically became a thing within CrossFit that you had
right.
separate programming. And so all the taboos that I was stepping on turned out to be more forward thinking than perhaps people wanted me to believe.
Yeah, I think so. Seems that way, Eric. And so how did that go, opening EVF?
Well, EVF was great. That was an amazing moment in time. But prior, can I step back for a second and interject
Please.
something?
Yeah.
I had one at the end of one of my cycling classes. A gentleman came up to me. This is 2006, 2005, 2006. Came up to me and said, "I'm old. I'm tired. I'm retiring, and I can't live the life I want to live. What am I going to do?" And I was like, "Well, you're going to start weight training properly and get some intensity in your life and get away from your desk that you've been sitting at. He was a trial attorney. And get away from your desk and, you know, make a journal on everything I tell you to do. And you'll write a book and, you know, see what happens. And sure enough, it was ironically Chris Crowley who wrote Younger Next Year. Based on that conversation and many training sessions that we had one-on-one where I would brain dump. And that was an important part of the story for EVF, because it was, how many times is this story, do I have to build something and then someone else profit off of it and succeed off of it? Even with back to EVF, the practice class that I was teaching at Equinox, there was another well-known program that was coming to my class every night with a notepad, documenting everything that we were doing, and approached me about making it a thing. And I said, I'm not, you know, going to give up editorial control of this so that you guys can make it whatever you want to make it and make me look like a fool, or, you know.
Right.
You kind of basically steal the concept without any validity behind it.
Right.
And that became a well-known program, which I don't know if we should mention it or not, but probably not.
You know,
you can connect the dots with the timeline and figure out who it was and what it was. But it was something that I taught many classes, realizing what was happening. And it was like, you know, I didn't invent the push-up, and I didn't invent the jumping jacks, and I didn't invent lunges or squats or plyometrics or anything else. But I had a very specific formula for putting it all together. And the demographic that I attracted a certain degree of intensity that, you know, was like-minded. So those were kind of stepping stones to building to EVF and kind of owning your program and building your own brand and putting your identity to it and kind of owning it and making the most of it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's important. I'm glad that you went back to share that, because it really shows the intent, and you were so purposeful in opening EVF. You really, it sounds like, wanted to have freedom, independence, autonomy of your own programming, and you did just that. How, you know, one thing we haven't touched on too is, did you guys need backers? How did you get the money to open EVF?
Well, we basically saved nickels and dimes and self-funded, and kind of felt like if I had someone who was a heavy investor, they would have strong opinions, as they rightfully should. And it would have certainly benefited us in a lot of ways to have had deeper pockets and to have some expertise in either real estate or in tech. But I was too afraid of giving up my autonomy at that point that we just decided to shoestring it and stay self-funded and 100% owner. Now, that didn't stop my coaches from questioning my programming, though. So, you know, I still had that challenge. And ironically, on my 60th birthday, many of them wrote video messages to me saying, everything you said to us became true. It's how we live our lives now. And they had these beautiful reflections about the old man was right. And, you know, they regretted all the challenges that they put in front of me when I was coaching and teaching.
Oh, wow. That's so special.
So it took a couple of years for that to come back, but, you know, eventually it kind of came very full circle.
Did you?
And ironically, can I interject again?
Please, always.
The beauty of Chris Crowley writing that amazing book and having such an amazing platform, which he built into a retreat in Aspen, and it became like a whole lifestyle thing, was that book served me purposefully when I came down with Parkinson's, because I always think of Parkinson's as premature aging. And that book was written for an older client than I was biologically. And, but all the wisdom that he accrued and all the knowledge that we shared kind of came back. And so in a way, it was a Terminator story where I went back to the future, created something that it would benefit me for when I got there in the real world, and lived my life, and then came upon that resource again and read it, and it was impactful in how I built out my program for Parkinson's.
Wow.
And I say
Wow.
that incredibly humbly. I mean,
Yeah.
I followed the hand that was leading me more than I was creating anything out of my own brilliance. It was
Mm.
just a matter of being humble enough to read the cues that life was laying out for me, and having enough faith and trust that if I followed the path, that it would lead to some place I want to get to.
And when you were running EVF, were you this intentional with your process, or is this something that you're sharing now in hindsight?
No, I was pretty intentional. I mean, some people would say pig-headed. I'm sure there's a lot of negative ways you can. Uh, I just tried to stay true to myself. It's that it's the old Socrates quote of "Know thyself," and it felt like there was lots of people who kind of wanted the same thing that I was searching for, and if I could be true to that, then at least I made one person happy.
And did you enjoy owning and operating EVF?
Oh, it was exhausting. And, I was coaching a tremendous amount, and then people convinced me that I needed to coach less so I could build a system
Right.
and have other people in charge and try to back myself out, basically make myself a little more obsolete than necessary. And that worked in part because it gave me a strong hand in leadership. But then people started confusing me with the cleaning crew. And because I was the first one to pick up something that needed to be put away, and the first one to, microcosm my view of the club through the client experience, and was humble enough to, to not need the title, and to, you could just kind of do whatever needed to be done is when it needed to be done, and assume the role, and help the community the best I could.
Yeah. And that community, actually, speaking of, how was that, building that community at EVF? Did it happen organically? Was it something, at that time, was it just a word of mouth situation? Were you getting press? Like, how did you build that community?
We were able to get a little press, but it was print press, so it wasn't as directly correlated to a burst of leads as much as it would be if it was social media driven.
Right.
But it was really people coming in, just demoing a class, meeting me, spending time with me.
Yeah.
My first classes were 2 to 4 people, and it just kind of slowly built, and lots of conversations about what they were looking for, and what was working, what wasn't working with them, and just a lot of one-on-one time, which is the beauty in the beginning, is you have the time to do that.
Best. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
so
then,
it was pretty organic.
Right. So it happened organically. And okay, so when did you and Deborah get married?
2010.
And your firstborn was?
2000. Oh, my firstborn was 2003. Because I have a 22-year-old.
You have your 22-year-old. Pardon me. Right.
Right. So she was along for the ride with Deborah.
Yeah.
And Deborah knew her since she was like 1 or 2, and was helping me raise her. And we had a lot of life that we lived in those first couple of years for a young couple, and 2 people that were interested in building a life together. There was a lot going on.
Yeah. So your daughter was along the ride for EVF and building that business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
She was a big part of it. She was one of the junior coaches. She would come in and she'd rip off 15 kipping pull-ups and squats and burpees, and she could out burpee anyone because she was only 3.5 feet tall. So she could do burpees and with the group. And of course we ran kid classes, which she was a part of. And, and again, it was just scratching my own itch and going back as an homage to starting with kids, and that whole 20-year difference or 10-year difference in between when I started that and then started EVF.
Yeah, so cool.
So there was a lot happening.
A lot, yeah. And I guess if you're ready to share Row House and how that was conceived and what the steps were there that you guys took to get Row House started.
Sure. You want to jump in there?
Let's go for it. If you feel if it's time. I mean, am I jumping too far ahead?
No, because I have to go back because we wrote that business plan before
Right.
we opened EVF. So everything was kind of building in layers. I don't know whether Deborah gets full credit for the origin story or if I do, but the way I remember the story is what I'm going to go with. And she's done enough podcasts that if she has a different version, I fully support it. But I remember that there was a rower in Equinox that was in the back corner near the water fountain where the ceiling was low. And it was kind of tucked away and no one used it. Or occasionally someone would use it and either they were brilliant rowers or they were complete kooks who never been on a rowing machine but thought it spoke to them somehow. And they just got on it and pulled with their arms and didn't use their legs. And
Right.
it was never lost on me that there were those two camps of complete novices and extreme experts. And so
true.
and then of course there was 50 elliptical machines and 30 treadmills. And I remember having dinner with Deb. We were in East Hampton at our house and we were having dinner and I was like, what's up with 50 elliptical machines when it's such a garbage workout? Which I regret saying because there's a time and place for everything. But at that point in my life, it didn't have the efficacy of rowing and the full body mechanics of rowing and the postural benefits of rowing. And, there was just something about the rowing machine that spoke to me. And my limited CrossFit experience gave me enough time on the rower to realize that it could be your best friend or your worst enemy.
Yeah.
And I was like, it would be kind of cool if, there was a studio filled with rowing machines and one elliptical. Just kind of flip the formula. And we started talking about it and quickly someone's idea became both our ideas. And we started iterating on what that would look like. What would the music be? What would the community be? How would we find people? Why wasn't it done before? Kind of just peeling back the layers of saying, is this really a white space opportunity or is this just a trip down Crazyville?
Right.
And we both we were ambitious enough to do our own program. And at that point, I had enough success that I felt comfortable taking a chance and trusting my own itch. And that went into works and we laid it out and doubled back on it once we felt like EVF was a success and was building and had its own legs. And so 2014, we pulled the trigger on opening Row House.
And your first location was where?
Columbus Circle. So we called it Columbus Circle, but it was a little west of Columbus Circle. It was more like the power station area, which is now just north of Hudson Yards. So it was an area that was becoming popular, but wasn't quite there yet. And we wanted to do it on the ground floor and make it a showcase experience that, deserved to be on the ground floor, not in the basement, not in the second floor. And we, figured if it didn't work, we would just assume that space for EVF. So we put an EVF downstairs and showcased Row House and started building that.
And so
and
EVF...
there was another kid popped in the picture at that point.
Okay.
Because there wasn't enough going on.
No, of course not. That's right. I remember that Deborah I believe she was pregnant was she pregnant when you guys opened that first Row House?
We had our son Carter in 2000. His birthday is 9/10/11. So 2011. So just before we opened EVF, we had Carter. And that was an amazing to have a little infant in a gym and running the gym and building the brand with a 1-year-old was quite an experience. And then my daughter at that point was probably 7 or 8. And then when we opened EVF, Magnus was on his way.
Wow.
And so Deb graduated the Goldman Sachs 10K program. I think our son was 2 days old when she got her diploma, for lack of a better word, I guess her certificate for
Yeah.
completing the program. So we do well with like lots of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Seems
Chaos.
to be our creation story.
Yeah, it's great. So, okay, so you open this row house and EVF is still operating.
Yeah.
So you're running all of this at the same time. And were you teaching at row house as well?
Yes.
Okay. And are you still
And in
teaching it?
EVF.
You're still teaching at EVF.
Yeah.
Did you find, did you have crossover with clients? Were clients supporting both businesses?
There was some of that, but I think they were very distinct and very unique. So for
Mm-hmm.
the most part, there were CrossFitters that liked rowing enough that they would take classes, but they weren't embracing the greater culture of rowing together, of rowing on stroke, of the musicality of it. So you'd row to the beat of the music.
Mm-hmm.
And so it had a very different flavor and a different feel. One of the core concepts was if you want to go far, pull together.
Right.
So the idea of syncing up and aggregating a score instead of a leaderboard, you aggregated a score for the entire room's effort. So
Mm-hmm.
you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so everyone was rallied around the idea of getting each other to chip in and keep their mind focused on what they were doing so that they could maximize their meters and get the most out of it. Whereas CrossFit, it was just balls to the wall, go as hard as you can, for 2 minutes or whatever the rowing interval was, and then, hop off and do your next thing.
Mm. And I'm sitting here while listening to you, and I'm thinking, my gosh, the thought of you running both of these businesses while raising your family, and the fact that you're also doing this together, yeah, that's a lot. You guys had a lot going on.
Yeah.
And soon after, you opened another row house location, right?
Yeah.
There wasn't that much time,
Yeah. We opened another one in Columbus, in Chelsea.
right?
And then we did a pop up on the Upper East Side. And
Mm-hmm.
we did a pop up in Montauk.
Right.
And
And
so,
so you guys
yeah,
were going.
there was a lot going on.
Yeah. And how did you, now I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
how did you end up in California?
When we sold Row House, we wanted to stay close to the brand because we knew it needed to be nurtured.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone seems to get rowing wrong because they just assume it's just another fitness modality and they just treat it like it's another fitness modality. So we wanted to stay as close as possible to it, to stay true to the culture and true to the marketing and try to fulfill all our brand promises and really kind of see this go to wherever it could possibly go to. So that's what brought us to California. And we were bi-coastal for 2 years. And then when COVID hit, we were on vacation out here. And, 2 weeks became 6 weeks, became 6 months, became a year. And,
Mm-hmm.
everything kind of went in the direction of COVID. And that was another challenging chapter.
Yeah. Before we get into that, just one quick one that I don't want to forget about is, first off, of course, it goes without saying, congratulations on a successful sale of Row House and all that entailed, which is a whole story in itself. But where's EVF at this point?
EVF still is alive.
Mm-hmm.
We turned it over to one of my founding managers, and he's maintained the culture, and he's didn't change the name because he considered it an homage and an honor to keep the name. And
Awesome.
I was very, very happy for him that we were able to agree to do that, and he had my blessing, and he's doing a great job.
That's
So
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it lives
Okay.
on.
It lives on. Man. So now you are in California, COVID hits, and you guys decide to just stay there and raise your kids there. And how at what point that's 2019 and you were diagnosed in 2020.
Yeah.
What got you to that diagnosis?
Oh, that's a good question. I was having some core stiffness, and I noticed a slight limp in my left leg that was, easily written off as being an injury or an overuse injury or something that was mechanical and muscular, uh, or skeletal at worst.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed a slight tremor when I would speak and get a little nervous. And I was like, well, it's just nerves. And, I've been grinding and pushing and working long hours and doing all the stuff that we've just talked about for a bunch of years. Maybe this is just the price that I'm paying for, riding this poor horse to death.
Right.
And sure enough, it turned out to be otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And was that, if you don't mind my asking, was that just a bunch of tests were run?
No, I did.
Doctors?
I sought out a couple people that I kind of felt would be knowledgeable. But there was one woman who did a lot of concussion protocols for like hyperbaric chambers and stuff like that for people who have concussions. And I had more than my handful being an active kid and riding
Right.
dirt bikes and climbing trees and playing sports. I figured that, if it was the concussion, like traumatic brain injury, then that would be something that she would be able to figure out. And I think she was the first one that noticed I had a slight tremor that was unrelated to the TBI or potential TBI. And so
Right.
we kind of checked that box, and that led to a friend in the neighborhood who I met who had been hit the previous year by a car. And he had a neurologist at a local hospital, and he was like, oh, you should go see my neurologist and, try to get to, if it's not muscular and it's not skeletal, then maybe it's neurological. And that was the beginning of the process of, meeting a neurologist and them telling me to come back in a week or two and confirming that. And the beauty of it was, as difficult as it is to hear that you have Parkinson's, it wasn't ALS and it wasn't all the other things that it very well could have been.
Of
And
course.
so there was a certain relief in saying, well, at least this thing has a name and I can, do the best I can working with it, living the lifestyle that I'm living, which ironically is exactly what probably prevented it from being much earlier and the symptoms from not being nearly as bad as it is for some people. Is that all the things that they advocated, the things that I spent the last 40, 50 years doing.
Right. Right.
So, for a guy who likes to exercise to be told he needs to exercise every day, it was like, okay,
Yeah. Sounds good.
exactly. So it's, and then, I joke often and say, life was too easy previously. But in a lot of ways, this was a challenge to figure this next chapter out that is taking all of my knowledge and all of my intuition and all of my drive and motivation to figure out this opponent and, the challenges that it presents, because it's motor-based skills, it's balance, it's everything from, loss of smell to loss of smiling and expression. It's apathy. It's, it hits you on just about every level. So it's kind of like whack-a-mole. And when I think about it through a fighting lens, it's like fighting someone who knows all your weaknesses and attacks all your weaknesses and is aware of all your strengths and kind of turns those against you. So my motivation and drive and ambition, apathy kind of wipes that out. So it's like, how do you overcome this ever evolving opponent that understands all my weaknesses and all my strengths, and I just have to beat him with resilience. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing and being so open about all of this. I'm curious, given your background and given all of the sort of practices that you have lived your whole life, and your naturally, your natural curiosity, right? When you started to discover this diagnosis, and you were, dealing with doctors and whatnot, how did you navigate through all of that? And, were there frustrations besides obviously, well, not obviously, but besides just the frustrations perhaps that you may have encountered around just learning that you have this, but were there frustrations within the system and navigating through all of it?
Yeah, I think from the system perspective, it's dealt with very matter of factly.
Yeah.
Which, it's like, oh, you have Parkinson's, it's not going to kill you. You're going to die with it. There's nothing you can really do. So go exercise and good luck.
Yeah.
Go home and forget everything I told you.
Yeah.
Basically. And,
Yes.
It's not exactly what you need at that point. You kind of feel like you don't need to solve the problem, but you need to be moving in the right direction.
Totally.
So, so direction becomes more important than pace. And, those universal truths of, life is more a matter of faith than it is sight, like walk the path and it will reveal itself to you, that kind of idea. Mm-hmm. So wake up each day and come up with a plan that you're going to give this your best. And if you have it, great. And if you don't, that's okay. And be a little empathetic to yourself. And, so it tapped into all of my foundational truths. And in part, that manifesto became something that I essentially had written for myself as well, many years later, and the irony is the part that you didn't get to yet, there's a backstory on, which we'll tap into because it's going to be relevant to the question you just asked me.
Oh, okay.
So I don't want to jumpstart and assume where you're going, but the end of that came from my daughter when she was very young and she would try to learn something new. And she's amazing. It's a proud dad moment. She's a musician. She's a dancer. She's an artist. She went to LaGuardia and demonstrated abilities that were unknown to me. Played the flute and played the bassoon, and just an amazing kid. And when she was little and she struggled doing something, an exercise or whatever it was, I would always say, don't say I'm sorry for not being able to do something. Just say, let me try again. This is where I get all like choked up and become like a babbling baby. But
yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, please. It's so beautiful, and I'm feeling it too.
So, I would always say, we're our strongest when we lift each other up or when we pick ourselves up. Yeah. And it's just something that, overcoming your fear and overcoming your shortcomings or your doubts, it's just a matter of, it's just an opportunity for you to step up and try again and be the best version of yourself that you can be. And that's essentially what, I'm bringing to this fight, is that I'm willing to do that every day.
Yeah.
Sorry to...
No, because, and please, I'm so with you. And I, too, am, feeling that. And, one of the really beautiful things that you just touched upon is so much a part of helping ourselves is in helping others, right?
Yeah.
But lifting up others can just, how much more fulfilling is that? Is there in life than that, right? And one of the things that I think is so important about to just share right now in this moment, I feel, is that it's somewhat overlooked sometimes because group exercise and training and fitness has become, a whole industry.
Right.
But at the heart of it is people like ourselves, quite frankly, who just want to give people life, right? Want to give people feel this.
You just want to share it.
Yeah, you can feel this, right?
Yeah.
And so now hearing that your journey has taken you where you are now with Parkinson's, and, and I know we haven't gotten there yet, but the work that you're doing now, it just, it's a beautiful story that is unique to you. But I, in this journey that you're on now, you were diagnosed in 2020, we're in 2026. I actually don't know this, and I do have to ask you, and I purposefully didn't look it up because I wanted to ask you and not know the answer. Is when one's prescribed with Parkinson's, do doctors talk about medication?
They do. I think it's whether or not you tolerate the medication is more impactful than what medication you're going to take.
Mm-hmm.
I think the gold standard is a drug called carbidopa-levodopa,
Mm-hmm.
and it helps primarily with your tremor and it helps with some of the movement-based, the stiffness that you feel, the shuffling of your feet, the small movement. It kind of helps with the motor-based skills more than anything else. The thing that, at least to my knowledge, that doesn't help is apathy, which is kind of the driving force of discouragement.
Right.
It's the thing that kind of steals. You can have all the passion and all the drive and all the love to do something, but if there's no dopamine in the system or a lack of dopamine in the system, it short circuits all of your personal motivation because it's dopamine supported.
Yeah.
And so you can take your most favorite things in life, and if you don't have a disciplined practice of doing them, then those things just simply fall away because you just have no interest in doing it because there's no dopamine reward.
Right.
There's no, someone once said to me, dopamine isn't the pursuit of a goal. It isn't the reaching of a goal. It's the pursuit of the goal.
The pursuit of the goal. Totally.
So, all the things that take effort and hunt release dopamine, and then you pursue whatever it is that you're pursuing. But without that release, there's no drive to do anything. So it seems as if you're disinterested or withdrawn, and then it affects your voice, it affects your handwriting, it affects anything that moves. So you don't smile as much. People think you're angry. That isolates you more. Depression soon follows, and it all builds momentum in the wrong direction. So you have to find a way to kind of stop that, not feel bad for yourself, focus on the things that you want to achieve and the things and the purpose in your life, and give yourself more meaning so that you get up and you fight a good fight and make the most of your day and the most of this opportunity you have, because at the end of the day, it's not the worst thing that could possibly happen.
Right. Yeah.
But it is the splinter in your own eye, so you do feel it, but it's not maybe as bad as many people have it. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, of course, always the perspective. Do you have a daily practice that you do that helps you stay purposeful and, positive, to put it simply?
Yeah, I think that I refer back to a lot of what originally inspired me. So, As a Man Thinketh, I have a copy of them on the table as we sit here. I read my Bible. I find inspiration in my faith. I find inspiration in the people that are around me. Certainly, my children deserve to have a dad that's fully available and maybe not as active or as responsive as he was at one point, but still concerned and loving and caring and available and emotionally in tune with what's going on. So you are present, but maybe in a different way.
Yeah.
So it's like running. I can't run a 5-minute mile anymore, but I can still walk the dog.
5-minute mile.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt.
As I said before, it's kind of like it's premature aging. So, if you live long enough, you would eventually have to give up or change some of the things that you initially had to do. Mine just came at a very accelerated pace.
Mm-hmm.
So you lose some of that identity that you have as an athlete. You lose some of that purposefulness that you do when you're training for an event. But that was going to happen at some point, maybe when I was in my 80s, I would have thought, or my 90s, God willing. Or, if technology keeps lengthening people's age, maybe a little older. But eventually there was going to be a breakdown of our body because our body was made to break down at a certain point.
Of course.
And so you fall back on philosophy and psychology, and things like the Stoics had wonderful philosophy, where the obstacle becomes the way, what impedes action promotes action, and you just kind of work through the challenge that's in front of you, and it shapes your life in a different direction than it would if there was no obstacle there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's lots of things that I pull from that kind of get me through my day, but it usually involves stretching. It always involves exercise. It always involves other people, being present. And probably the hardest part of this process was I went through a bout of depression when I couldn't exercise.
Yeah.
Early on, when I first got diagnosed, I was like, well, I'll just exercise more. And unfortunately, that wasn't the answer either. I tried to outwork it. And what I need to do is outlast it, not outwork it. And so I got a back injury, which was, again, my body telling me to slow down and deal with what I was dealing with. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't walk for about 8 months. That put me into a depression, because now the exercise, which was my main form of medicine, as well as the medication would only work so much, and it didn't do anything for depression or apathy. So I was kind of just walking through that one with a wife, 3 kids, and a new location and not as many friends. And, there was a big disconnect from my previous life where I was celebrated every day with a group of people teaching, and, and for me as an instructor, it was never about having a platform for me to showcase my ability. It was about getting other people to follow along so that they could find their own strengths and their own ability. So, there was a big loss of identity because I wasn't doing that. And I knew that although I was walking through hell, I would eventually get through the other side. The problem is the people around me didn't realize that I was making progress. And so they were having their own struggles and their own doubts, and watching, the relationships with your children change. And so it was hitting on every level. Yeah. And so I just started refining things like power plate movement, hyperbaric chamber, cold showers, kind of tapping some of the biohacking modalities. Yeah. Methylene blue, for those that are in that world, and just kind of uncovering these layers of optimization that could get me moving again and get me feeling better. And so once I finally got over the back injury, I started to unravel through the depression and start to rebuild my life and my activity with the kids, and kind of reclaim a position in my family that was important to everyone.
God bless. That must have been really challenging. Yeah, I can only imagine. You mentioned your faith. Is that something that you have always been close to your whole life, or did it become more important to you when post-diagnosis?
It was important to me early on. I was fortunate enough that I was exposed to my mother had very strong faith. She was more spiritual than she was religious, but I would say she was a living example of strength, and she was that until the day she passed in my arms. So literally took her last breath and, looked at me and then looked up to heaven.
Wow.
Didn't plan on crying this much, but it was a culmination of a life that was lived with faith and lived in strength. And she gave me that example on her last day.
What was your mom's name?
Joyce.
Hey, Joyce. Wow. Oof.
Lots of tears. Sorry.
Yeah. No. It's.
But yeah, it was very, very impactful. That so I had exposure to it early on, and then I went to a prep seminary and thought about being a religious person, and decided that religion wasn't as much my calling as it was spirituality, and fell in love with Christ and the message, and finding the kingdom of heaven in myself and in my relationships, and all the wonderful scripture references from When I mentioned earlier, life is about faith, not about sight. And just finding a lot of truth and a lot of convictions in it. And so it was consistent throughout my life. I think at moments you have clarity and consciousness and awareness that is much more refined than perhaps other moments.
Yes.
And trying to stay in that spot is almost impossible, but it's beautiful when it happens. So I've had those moments where I would say I was as spiritually alert and spiritually aware as anyone can be. And then I've had other moments where I had my doubts and my fears, and just realized that that's part of it. It's what makes faith is that, it vacillates a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, and then ironically, it came back full force with a Bible group that was founded by the owner of the gym that I work out at.
You're kidding.
No. So the gym that I train at out here has a Bible study once a week. And although we may be religiously different denominations, we're all kind of seeking the same spirit and the same truth and the same love and the same support and community. And consequently, it was the right calling at the right time.
That's so beautiful. Oh man, that's so good.
So life has got me, and it's been very fair and very good despite the adversity. It's given me a platform to help other people from, and that's going to be the next chapter.
So that's where we are now. And thank you for sharing all of that, because it really gets us to where we are now. It's like you've had all this time to build yourself to this point. And how did you meet your partner on the podcast?
I was at a Parkinson's convention, and he was the keynote speaker.
Oh.
It's a short story. He's a former rower. He's currently a rower. There's nothing former about him. He's a man that wanted to row in the Olympics, but didn't have quite the skill to get him there. And when he became diagnosed with Parkinson's, he was more than capable in his late 40s to row on the Paralympic team. So his Parkinson's created this dream that he's pursued as a result of, and ironically, that's not the story with me from a sporting end, but it's a story for me, and the Parkinson's has made me a better version of myself.
Right.
And I'm everything that I was before, but more amplified with a higher degree of empathy and a much more greater understanding of challenges. So it's made me it upgraded me in a way.
Yeah. So when did you decide to start this podcast? What was the was it your first idea, or was it a process of trying to think of what to do together?
I think that the origin story was we went out to dinner. Deborah said, let's go talk to him. And we talked to him, and we introduced ourselves, and we went out to dinner and came up with the idea of, Deb was like wanting me to do a podcast anyway.
Oh,
and she was like, this could be really good to have someone to do it with, because it will keep you accountable, and it will give you someone to have your own relationship with, and you can kind of build off of each other's strengths. And Todd was looking for something similar, because unfortunately Parkinson's affects your employment opportunities because of all the symptoms that you end up dealing with. But so we figured, let's go back to the thing that we're both great at, which is, building communities and helping people and coaching people and interacting with people. And that was the origin of it.
I love it. And is it officially called The Athlete's Journey?
Yes. It's Parkinson's and Athlete's Journey.
And when is it launching?
This week.
So excited. I'm so excited. And
Uh,
sorry, go ahead.
I'm a little nervous. I'm glad you're excited.
No, it's so great. And what is it? What's the premise of the podcast?
The premise is to establish a mindset and goals to live the best life that you can live despite the challenges of Parkinson's. Mm-hmm. So it's just two guys having an honest discussion about what's working, what's not working, what we've learned. In all honesty, the people that we're going to interview will be dropping as much knowledge as, if not more knowledge than we have, because they've been dealing with it for longer and have more experiences and different expertise. Mm-hmm. So it's just a way for us to stay on top of the latest and greatest and share information on everything from psilocybin and the effects on Parkinson's to, exercise and training and mindset and goals and just kind of the whole myriad of things that you would tackle as an athlete.
So important. And I'm so happy and grateful that you guys are doing this, because I just feel instinctively that this will help more than just, yes, it's going to help the Parkinson's community, but I think even beyond that, because adversity is adversity. And, having a diagnosis, the after effect of having a diagnosis, as you very well know, and the phases of sort of there's that first phase of, oh, at least now I know what's wrong, right? At least now I know. At least now I have a name for it. And there's a little bit of like almost like a honeymoon phase, like, oh God, at least now I know. And then it's that, oh shit, I have this diagnosis, now what? And then it's suddenly things that you could do yesterday, you're questioning if you can still do it the next day. The psychology behind all of it is so complicated and trying. And to have a voice like yours, Eric, and Todd, I'm sorry, is his name?
Yes.
Todd. I don't know Todd. I'm imagining that the two of you together are going to be quite the inspirational duo. But I can say, knowing you, having a voice like yours out there leading the way, I can't imagine this isn't going to be just hugely transformational for so many people. I'm so excited and grateful.
From your lips to God's ears.
Absolutely.
It's I think it will impact a greater community because, as you say, adversity is adversity. Yeah. And, we're all kind of struggling with it and dealing with it the best we can. But, to know that you have other people that have lived through it and thrived through it is important. And to have faith that you can still do many of the things that you enjoy doing. Maybe you do them a little differently, or maybe you shake a little bit when you do it. But that's, that's not the end of the world. The resilience that it creates is the ultimate weapon against it. You just... and to be grateful and for the people around you. I've always used to say to my coaches, gratitude and humility are the foundational virtues.
That's so true.
And if you can hold on to gratitude and humility, you can learn from anyone, you can learn from everything, and you have the gratitude to be appreciative for that opportunity, then the rest of it's pretty much falls into place.
Ooh, yeah, it's very true. Very powerful. So, Eric, I have to ask you before we wrap up, because this is such a story that you just shared. My God, your life is unbelievable. How, Eric, do you define success?
Oh, wow. I forgot that you asked that question. Could have prepared for that one.
It's better if you don't.
How do I define success? I think I said it before, the ability to walk through the fear of whatever it is that's holding you back and to start moving your body and start taking action. And that dispels the fear. That's like the first step to success. We always used to say in the gym, the heaviest weight is the front door.
Yeah.
Or the first rep is the hardest rep.
Yeah.
There's many sayings that have supported that, but I think the action dispels fear. And if you can do that, you realize very quickly that procrastination and avoidance isn't a mental block, it's a biological block. And if you can get your body moving, then your mind will usually follow. And so success to me is taking action in spite of fear.
There you go. See now? That took no preparation. It just rolled out. It was beautiful. Wow.
Well, thank you so much, Marion. I really appreciate you. It was a walk down memory lane. I haven't thought about a lot of that in 20, 30, 40 years since I lived it.
Thank you for sharing.
It was super enjoyable having those memories brought back up and appreciating the impact that I've been fortunate enough to share with people.
Yeah, you've made a major impact, and I'm really excited to share this episode with everyone, and then also to get your new podcast out there. Thank you for doing this, Eric. I'm getting a little emotional, so thank you. Really, it means the world.
Namaste.
Namaste.